Resistance band core rotations, or often called band 10 to 2s, based on the kind of range of motion you're going for in the exercise. Probably one of the first rotational core exercises that are really easy to introduce, especially when it comes to rotational movement, being on your feet, to clients. It's definitely one of the first ones that I introduce before I do any other type of rotation on the ground. And one that's pretty easy to teach, right? Pretty easy to have people get and understand the technique. But a couple things. First, I'm gonna coach us up on the setup. The setup for the band, rotational 10 to 2. So you guys can see right now, based upon the video, you know, about the level of the band. Again, you may be constrained in a facility where you've got anchor points at a certain place because of the motion that we're going for is hands out in front, somewhat in line with shoulders, right? There's obviously some variation up or down. In a perfect world, if I can just get them to extend their arms out right in front of their chest, where it's just right in line, maybe slightly below, I'd rather see a little below than above, then the band's lined up in that direction. It's going to be ideal because then you're getting a straight across, you know, line of pull with the force from the band. But if it's not perfect, you know, again, you can alter positions either way. Starting with a lighter band, right? So based on the band sets you're using, going with a lighter band so that you can just learn the movement, the control, learn to brace while they're going through these rotational exercises, and then feet position. So for me, I like to, at least starting, again, the feet sometimes might sneak out a little bit, and that's okay. That's our natural athletic stance. Most of us aren't in a perfect athletic toe forward stance here, but if you got someone who's way out here, right, the feet are really turned out, I like to turn those feet in a little bit more, trying to go at least a little bit more directly forward with some small variation so that we are engaging the abductors a little bit more, because that really should be, as we're going about doing the exercise, it's a great cue to make sure someone feels like they're pushing through that inside foot, as that's going to be where we're generating the force. Obviously, it's going to, you know, transfer through the hips and into the core, so we rotate that band across. But also, hand that goes first, this will make a difference. And neither one's really right or wrong. They're just going to train slightly different things. You can think about it. If you grab the band with your inside closest to the anchor first and hold out in front, you're going to immediately feel a little bit on the inside, on the obliques on this side, versus if you grab with the outside hand, you're gonna feel more activation on that outside. So truthfully, you could and maybe you should train both. I prefer initially inside hand with the other hand over the top. A range of motion that you go is gonna be somewhat dictated by the individual as well as what you're looking for as a coach. I mentioned earlier, you know, when I first really started doing some of these, you know, introduced a lot by like JC Santana, my man Nick Timonello, band 10 to 2s, because that gave me the visualization in a clock, which I think works well for clients as well, is if I was going in between 10 and 2, that was kind of my range of motion, which ends up for a lot of people being somewhat in line with probably their hips and that leg. So that's a good, smaller, safe range of motion before we really progress into larger ranges of motion, which of course, as we go into a larger range of motion, we go faster speeds, we go heavier resistance. These are all considered progressions that do essentially make the exercise a little bit more challenging. So starting with that 10 to 2 is a really great place, just so we're controlling back to that position. Again, kind of pushing through that inside foot, going to the opposite. All right, so let's pick up on a couple things you might see from an error standpoint. First off, just engagement of the lower body, right? You got somebody, if they're not thinking about it and they're just locked out in those legs, again, not the end of the world. The body's meant to create tension and force in different positions, but it just might place a little bit more stress on the actual lumbar spine, when truthfully, a lot of this rotation, at least as we're rotating the hips and we're not disconnected, it's coming from the actual hip musculature, the pelvis, the glutes, those muscles too, and not just on the spine. I personally prefer to do that first before, and you could kind of call it just a different variation, a disconnected version, right? Where I'm just moving the spine and I'm not rotating the hips with. So small change. See if you guys see it again, right? This is the one we're going through in coaching now, which I think is best for most people. Feet are fixed, all right? So the feet necessarily aren't moving right away, but we're gonna rotate the pelvis through, like your belly button and your pelvis are like attached to your hands. They kind of have to move with you. That being different than keeping our pelvis where it's at and just disconnecting and rotating through that upper body. Both are great exercises. The second one though may place potentially more torque on the lower back. Do the arms need to be totally locked out? Yes and no. I find if someone is sensitive with the low back, it's starting with the hands in a little bit, but still getting them rotating. It's kind of the same as just going with a lighter band. You know, go with a lighter band, it's gonna be a little less torque so they can keep those arms locked out. That longer lever is gonna make us have to work more through the pelvis and the core, right? So range of motion, tension, those are progressions. Speed, so initially starting nice and slow, all right? So that as we get out there, if it's ripping them back, tension's probably too high. And then it could be maybe a little down the road, progressing to actual rotation of the foot. But anytime we're adding in more range of motion, change in stability, it's gonna be a progression. So starting with our standard rotation across, tension throughout, exhale as we're going over across is gonna be a really, really great place to start.